All right, so I'm currently on the phone with John. He's another musician that reached out about the interview series. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Jon Raven. I'm an international recording artist, and I'm really, really pleased to be on the show. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. So with these interviews, I always like to get a little personal and find out, how did you first connect with music? When did you first find it? And what about it was important to you?
Well, it was kind of the family business. I started when I was 5. And my family had a gospel band. Funny enough, very different from what I do now. But before I was 11, I had been in the studio and we did 4 albums for a subsidiary of RCA. So that was kind of how it all started.
Okay, awesome. And so being in that sort of environment, growing up around music and everything, were you pushed at an early age to learn an instrument, or did your participation in it come much more naturally?
A little bit of both. Funny enough, like I was pushed to study piano, which I'm glad I did because it's really good foundation. But then as I started, it sounds funny, as I started getting older. I think when I was about 7, 8, somewhere in there, I kind of started bargaining, and it was like, okay, I'll practice an extra 30 minutes a day on the piano if I can get a set of drums. And then I got the drums, and I love that because I got to drive everybody crazy with the drums, and then kind of the guitars came after that. So it was kind of aggression, but the piano was the only thing I was ever really made to play. I'm one of those people, like I hate keyboards of any type. So like typing, the fact that everything's not A, B, C, D, E, F, G in a row. So like the keyboard, it was great because that was like that. And then the different hand movements, but I found the drums and guitar much more natural for me.
Awesome. So it seems like you kind of on your own chose to go from instrument to instrument. Do you think that there was, some sort of motivation behind that, or were you intentionally like trying to soak up as much musical information as you could?
I've always been infinitely curious. I would sit and a lot of people now, probably some of the younger ones wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, but we used to have the old World Book Encyclopedia sets. And I would literally sit and read them, cover to cover. So whether it was to do with music or art or history or anything, I was infinitely curious. But then as I got older, I kind of refined my playing more out of necessity. There were times we'd be in the studio, and maybe the bass player or the guitar player, somebody was, they weren't there that day, we whatever. And overdubs needed to be done, and so I just kind of ended up refining, really through the process of overdubs, refining those skills.
Okay. And by overdubs, do you mean specifically re-recording a part, or do you mean like layering it?
No, specifically re-recording. So say if somebody had came into the studio and there was just something that we used to record all night, most of the time. And so, sometimes I'd go back in the next day, and we had a process whereby we would record, do a rough mix, and then overdub, and then do another mix, and kind of go from there. So there would be things sometimes that would just be missed. And if the person that had played those parts wasn't in the studio, then I ended up covering them quite a bit.
Gotcha. So going back a little bit, you soaked up all the information. You went from piano, drums to guitar, which is not all too different from my musical journey now that I think about it.
Cool.
Were you participating in like the school curriculum for band, or were you doing it all outside of school?
I got to for a couple of years, but we literally, like I said, from the time I was 5, I had tutors. We stayed. I was doing 4 or 5 shows a week when I was, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. So, but then I actually had a couple of years where, like in junior high and things, first thing that I grabbed was the tritome. So that was what I did in marching band.
Okay, sure. So you did marching band, and then I assume in addition to whatever you're doing inside of the curriculum or drumline or anything, you were also working on your own musical project outside of all that.
There was actually a period that during that same time, funny enough, I ended up I had studied martial arts from a very young age as well. And there was an old TV show called Peyton Place. And ABC was doing a movie called Peyton Place: The Next Generation. And so I had a modeling agent where I'd done some print modeling and things, and then I did a fight scene in this ABC movie of the week that they had called Peyton Place: The Next Generation, and it was like Hoyt Axton was kind of the main guy in it, from Gremlins.
Okay.
But then, so I had 2 or 3 years where I really got into the acting thing really heavy, and the music kind of dropped off until I bumped into this guy named David Lee Roth, and then the rock and roll thing kind of started.
Sure, sure. So let's talk about that. Coming out of, all of those years when playing music started to pick back up for you, what was your process and, kind of vision to getting back into music? What did you want out of it?
I'm going to be really honest. After years of playing in churches, and then in the 70s, they used to have these big gospel sings and all of that stuff. And going backstage at a Van Halen concert, which was through a family friend, funny enough. And I saw all the chicks backstage, and I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just, crazy Baptist women like that won't let a kid go. There's okay. So I honestly I got back into it because of the girls.
All right,
So that was kind of one thing led to another, and I had fun with it, and I'm 54 now, and I haven't never done anything outside of entertainment, and I've done music pretty much straight through aside from those 3 years.
Excellent. So, going down that line, what were some of the bands that you worked on, some of the music you put out?
Oh God, I think my favorite I would have to. I was working on a project called Rock God, which was a video game project, and we had people on that like Eric Singer from Kiss. We had Mark Slaughter, guys from like Steppenwolf, the Guess Who. I mean, on and on. And during the course of all that, and he passed away not too long ago, I met Bob Kulick. And Bob and I co-produced a couple of things together. And Bob was just a trip. He was fun to work with. Bob had got a Grammy for his work with Motorhead on Ace of Spades. And just total character. He had played guitar for Meatloaf, played with Paul Stanley's solo band, and was just a really excellent musician. But I mean, one of the most focused, kind of driven guys that you could be in the studio with. So I mean, I'd have to say out of everybody, and I mean, I worked with Dokken. I worked pretty much any of your classic '80s hard rock bands from that period. I've collaborated or known them or hung out backstage or done some shows, whatever. But I think really Bob was kind of a pinnacle moment, kind of sitting in the studio in the valley there and looking around at some of the trophies and. And I remember we had a kid that we were working with, and he decided he was going to run into we were talking about drums. So he sees a set of drums, in the tracking room, and he runs in there and jumps on him. And Bob's about having a meltdown, and he goes, "Dude, if Jason Bonham walks in here, he's going to kill you." So it was,
Sure.
But yeah, Bob was fun, man.
So were you doing mostly like session and for hire work, or?
During that period, I was doing a lot of producing. I was head of A&R for like 3 different independent record labels.
Okay.
2 of them were rock and roll. One of them was more kind of your Delta blues, that type of stuff. I think the biggest thing that they had like Fats Domino's Christmas catalog was one of the things that label carried. That was one of the bigger items, money making items. Then a guy named Van Brissard. So I went through a period where I kind of I was still in music, but I was doing much more behind the scenes than I was like out on the stage.
Okay. And how long were you doing that type of work before you were just like, I got to get back on the stage. I gotta make music here.
About a decade.
Okay.
Give or take about 10 years.
And then once you did kind of, make that decision that that was going to be your next step, did you form your own band or did you join somebody else's band?
No, I formed my own. And then what was kind of interesting was when I came back in, by that point, the whole streaming thing had really taken over, and the nature of the business. I mean, I grew up during a time when you could actually sell records. That was what you did. And without the internet, honestly, we sold a lot of records. So it was kind of a bit of a learning curve trying to figure out how to keep the same kind of income coming in from doing music. And so I had collaborated some with a guy named Hab Haddad, who Hab was the vice president of new media for McGee Entertainment. And so I learned a lot about new media, and that's where a lot of my focus is. Like I'm not too worried about how many streams I get on Spotify because they just don't pay enough. So with what I'm typically doing, it's like the film that I'm directing right now is I'm basically using all of the different creative things that I enjoy, but it's working with my partner, Jason, who's like a brother to me. It's one of those deals where it's like, okay, what's the most productive and really profitable way to deliver music these days, and sync licensing through film or doing your own thing with the Netflix, type special or whatever. You just can't even compare the difference in the amount of money you get per stream for the same amount of time for your music.
Yeah, the music industry landscape for distribution right now is really shaky.
That's a good way to put
it. Try to be polite.
I'm being real polite because we could probably do 5 shows at once running through my head right now. So.
Yeah. That seems to be kind of the general consensus through the people that I interview is that the whole digital distribution side of it is just, it's so hard for independent musicians to actually feel like they're living off of making music because streaming just isn't paying.
Well, there's that, and it's also, I mean, like when I started out in this business, I think the number was there were about 7 million albums a year total, like every kind of release you can think of, singles, albums, LPs, whatever. And that was considered a pretty big number kind of at the pinnacle, but that was it. I mean, you got more than 7 million people a month popping stuff on all of these streaming services.
Yeah, it's available to everybody.
Yeah, and it's a different audience now too, because back when there was a longer attention span with artists, I think. So you didn't have, and I'm going to be blunt, sometimes there's a lot of mud in the water and it's hard for people to sort through and even find what they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have an audience with a shorter attention span. I've noticed looking at demographics, song lengths have kind of gotten shorter and shorter. I don't think we're going to get any more Bohemian Rhapsodies.
Probably not.
I wish we were, but I don't think we will. So it's changed.
Right. So, setting that on the table for a moment, let's talk about your current projects. So you did mention that you're currently directing a film. Are you involved also in recording any music or putting any music out?
Oh yeah, we just released. We actually formed a band. The name of the film is The Passion of the Gods. And it's actually a really wild merger between Egyptian mythology and Arthurian legend.
Oh, cool.
And what was funny is some of the visuals that we have for that. They're dark. It's an animated film, which is fun because if you can imagine it, you can pretty much create it in animation. And so we had some people when we first put up the Facebook page. We have the character Lilith, and she looks kind of like a red devil, woman. And we had some people just going nuts, going, "This is satanic, it's evil, you guys are children of evil, blah, 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 blah." So we actually started a band called Evil's Child to do the music for the movie.
Nice, nice.
So it was kind of an inside joke with us. It was like, well, if the shoe fits. So, but yeah, my partner, Jason Goodby, he does a lot, like he's demoing constantly. And then, he shoots the tracks over to me, and then I'll start kind of dissecting them, and then we go back and forth. I mean, what's cool, the one cool thing about technology and the internet is we've been able to do everything remotely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's definitely a lot cheaper than $2,000 a day studio lockouts.
Yeah, for sure. So you guys are currently writing, or have you released already?
We've released the title track already. And it's literally called "The Passion of the Gods," title track by Evil's Child. And then we're working on there's so many sides when you're scoring a film, which for people that aren't familiar with that term, it's like a side's 45 seconds or less, and you might have 2 or 3 sides playing for a scene, or you might have a portion of a song, or so we've been writing nonstop for months, and we're now, starting to get into actually tracking these things.
Excellent, excellent. So what are some of your favorite movie or memories in the time that you've been with music? Since you have such a long career with it, I imagine you've got a lot of stuff that kind of just stands out to you.
Yeah, it's hard to say a favorite. I mean, like when I was a kid, I remember a lot of the gospel bands that we toured with ended up going on to being like country stars. So I can remember, like the Dixie Melody Boys and Oak Ridge Boys and some of the older country acts, and I was like this little kid running around because everybody would have their buses, like a lot of they had these big outdoor. See, so I'd be running around beating on everybody's bus doors, and I was everybody knew me. I was this little kid, so. I'd go on one bus and they'd have fried chicken, and then I was a funny kid because I'd go grab a bucket of chicken and I'd peel the skin off of about 10 pieces of it and piss everybody off and just eat the skin, and then as I got older, I remember, just got to got to meet Glenn Campbell and was hanging out with him. And it was at the time when the Mandrell sisters had their TV show, and I had the worst crush on Arlene. Mandrell, and I ended up getting Arlene was opening for Glenn Campbell, and I remember she we hung out and had a great time, and she signed this poster for me, and she had on a swimsuit, and then my mother, being very religious, got so upset she like ripped up the poster, when I showed it to her.
Funny.
Thought it was the most vulgar, thing ever. And then just, and a lot of it was, hanging out, like Long Cold Winter Tour. I was doing some things behind the scenes with the Bullet Boys.
Mm-hmm.
And it about crushed me when Jeff LaBarge just passed away, but I had some great memories just hanging out with him and those guys. And I mean, I could go on and on. There's just so many. I found most musicians are pretty good people. You got those exceptions where the egos are a little inflated at times, but for the most part, I mean, I just had some great hangs, and I remember times when people would be warming up before going on stage, like Fred Corey from Cinderella was always trying to learn guitar, and it's a great drummer. So I would show Fred some things, and then he would turn around and show me some stuff on drums, or so it was just kind of always that camaraderie, I guess, that was my favorite part.
Awesome. So where can people check out the stuff that you put out? You said you put out a title track. What are some links to your social media?
Okay. The best place to find most of this would be on our Facebook page for the film. And I'm going to double check because if I remember, we ran out of letters. So I'm just going to look real quick. Yeah, we couldn't get the in there. So it's facebook.com Passion of the Gods. That's one of them. Okay. We have a website, thepassionofthegods.com. My website is jonraven.rocks. And then we also have a store with a lot of cool merch. which is passionfantasyart.shop. And then all of those have links to all that. I mean, we're on everything. We're on TikTok, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, but those the main websites have links to absolutely everything. And there's
Okay.
a lot of links on our Facebook page to the other stuff. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version.
Okay, and I'll make sure to get all those links in the video description and everything as well.
Very cool.
So I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So just a message that you feel resonates with you that you want to put out there.
I mean, given I think what we were talking about, the way the business has changed. I mean, I speak to musicians all the time, and they're like, we practice and we practice, but we can't do it. And when I ask them, and I'm like, okay, so how many hours do you spend a week, rehearsing? Oh, dude, we rehearse 3-4 hours a night. I'm like, okay, how many hours a day do you spend learning about the business? How many hours a day do you spend learning about licensing?
Mm-hmm.
And usually I get this deer in the headlights look. So I would just say to guys that are really serious and that want to have a shot at doing something in this business, spend as much time learning about the business as you do learning about the music, because show business has 2 words in it, and business is the biggest word.